Islam in the Western world. It is almost impossible to generalize about American Muslims. Converts, immigrants, factory workers, doctors, all are making their own contribution to America's future. This complex community is unified by a common faith, underpinned by a countrywide network of 1,000 mosques. Muslims were early arrivals in North America. By the 18th century there were many thousands of them, working as slaves on plantations. These early communities, cut off from their heritage and families, inevitably lost their Islamic identity as time went by. Today many Afro-American Muslims play an important role in the Islamic community. The 19th century, however, saw the beginnings of an influx of Arab Muslims, most of whom settled in the major industrial centers where they worshipped in hired rooms. The early 20th century witnessed the arrival of several 100,000 Muslims from Eastern Europe. The first Albanian mosque was opened in Maine in 1915. Others soon followed, and a group of Polish Muslims opened a mosque in Brooklyn in 1928. In 1947 the Washington Islamic Center was founded during the term of President Truman, and several nationwide organizations were set up in the 50s. The same period saw the establishment of other communities whose lives were in many ways modeled after Islam. More recently, numerous members of these groups have entered the fold of Muslim orthodoxy. Today there are about 5 million Muslims in America. Aftermath of the colonial period. At the height of European colonial expansion in the 19th century, most of the Islamic world was under colonial rule with the exception of a few regions such as the heart of the Ottoman Empire, Persia, Afghanistan, Yemen and certain parts of Arabia. But even these areas were under foreign influence, or, in the case of the Ottomans, under constant threat. After the First World War, with the breakup of the Ottoman Empire, a number of Arab states such as Iraq became independent. Others like Jordan were created as a new entity, and yet others like Palestine, Syria and Lebanon were either mandated or turned into French colonies. As for Arabia, it was at this time that Saudi Arabia became finally consolidated. As for other parts of the Islamic world, Egypt, which had been ruled by the descendants of Muhammad Ali since the L9th century, became more independent as a result of the fall of the Ottomans. Turkey was turned into a secular republic by Ataturk, and the Pahlavi dynasty began a new chapter in Persia where its name reverted to its eastern traditional form of Iran. But most of the rest of the Islamic world remained under colonial rule. Arab. It was only after the Second World War and the dismemberment of the British, French, Dutch and Spanish empires that the rest of the Islamic world gained its independence. In the Arab world, Syria and Lebanon became independent at the end of the war, as did Libya and the Sheikdoms around the Gulf and the Arabian Sea by the 1960s. The North African countries of Tunisia, Morocco and Algeria had to fight a difficult and, in the case of Algeria, long and protracted war to gain their freedom, which did not come until a decade later for Tunisia and Morocco, and 2 decades later for Algeria. Only Palestine did not become independent but was partitioned in 1948 with the establishment of the State of Israel. In India Muslims participated in the freedom movement against British rule along with Hindus, and when independence finally came in 1947, they were able to create their own homeland, Pakistan, which came into being for the sake of Islam and became the most populated Muslim state, although many Muslims remained in India. In 1971, however, the two parts of the state broke up, East Pakistan becoming Bangladesh. Farther east still, the Indonesians finally gained their independence from the Dutch, and the Malays theirs from Britain. At first Singapore was part of Malaysia, but it separated in 1963 to become an independent state. Small colonies still persisted in the area and continued to seek their independence, the Kingdom of Brunei becoming independent as recently as 1984. In Africa also major countries with large or majority Muslim populations such as Nigeria, Senegal and Tanzania began to gain their independence in the 1950s and 1960s, with the result that by the end of the decade of the 60s most parts of the Islamic world were formed into independent national states. There were, however, exceptions. The Muslim states in the Soviet Union failed to gain their autonomy or independence. The same holds true for Xinjiang, called Eastern Turkestan by Muslim geographers, while in Eritrea and the southern Philippines Muslim independence movements still continue. national states. While the world of Islam has entered into the modern world in the form of national states, continuous attempts are made to create closer cooperation within the Islamic world as a whole and to bring about greater unity. This is seen not only in the meetings of the Muslim heads of state and the establishment of the OIC, Organization of Islamic Countries, with its own secretariat, but also in the creation of institutions dealing with the whole of the Islamic world. Among the most important of these is the Muslim World League, Rabitat al-Alam al-Islami, with its headquarters in Mecca. Saudi Arabia has in fact played a pivotal role in the creation and maintenance of such organizations. Conclusion: the Islamic world remains today a vast land stretching from the Atlantic to the Pacific, with an important presence in Europe and America, animated by the teachings of Islam and seeking to assert its own identity. Despite the presence of nationalism and various secular ideologies in their midst, Muslims wish to live in the modern world but without simply imitating blindly the ways followed by the West. The Islamic world wishes to live at peace with the West as well as the East, but at the same time not to be dominated by them. It wishes to devote its resources and energies to building a better life for its people on the basis of the teachings of Islam, and not to squander its resources in either internal or external conflicts. It seeks finally to create better understanding with the West and to be better understood by the West. The destinies of the Islamic world and the West cannot be totally separated, and therefore it is only in understanding each other better that they can serve their own people more successfully, and also contribute to a better life for the whole of humanity.